Welcome back to the Tales of Agmar podcast. This is part 2, talking about the Theocracy. I'm your host, Sinjin, and let's just get going with this because we got quite a bit to cover today. Now, in terms of announcements, last week's episode was kind of long. This week I'm going to do another shorter one, so you can kind of see the two. Let me know which one you prefer in the comments below. And if you're not yet following the podcast, please definitely feel free to follow the podcast. Now, I have finally taken the leap and dropped a Patreon for the cast. Right, so there is now a Tales of Agmar Patreon. I will put a link in that in the descriptions of all the episodes. You may have already seen me do that with last week's ones. I made it this past Saturday. But definitely feel free to check out there. There's going to be a mix of free and, of course, subscriber and optional payment stuff. And where this money goes, that's raised by the Patreon one. It helps me keep ads off of Spotify and Apple Podcasts and Amazon Music as of right now. Because, the project isn't costing me too much stuff except for time. It does cost me in terms of money because I've got to pay an editor. And if you help out on Patreon, not only does that help me know that people like podcasts or that people like this Tales of Agmar podcast, but it also lets me, get stuff going for the book in the future because I'm currently going the route of, aside from having an editor for the podcast, I gotta pay. There are editors for books that you gotta pay to get everything sounding right. And I would like to get a good editor so that everything is flowing quite well for y'all. And that's where the money from the Patreon is gonna go, is it's gonna also help pay for the book going forward. Update on the book before we carry on. I have not yet finished this current draft. I'm hoping to do a really big push and get all the way down to the end of the book. And then I'm going to go back and clear up some things, and then I will be opening it up to beta readers. So stay tuned for that. And I will probably make more, I will make more book-related announcements inside of the Patreon in an effort to keep this more so about the lore and less about all of the, book and other things. Unless you guys don't want to, which in case, feel free to vent in the comments. But without further ado, let's carry on to finishing our talk about the Theocracy. Alright, so before we carry on about the military structure, I just want to shore up a few more points about the crystal that the Theocracy uses for their guns. Now, it is basically replacing the powder in the ammunition, and that gives them a more explosive force, and then further advancements have given them that semi-auto capability that we talked about near the end last time. Also, I forgot to mention, but the Aurelian gentleman who helps supply the Theocracy with this rare resource, his name is Bardy, and I alluded last time about that, how he gets some of his workers may or may not be through very good means, and by that I was alluding to indentured servitude, which is basically like the equivalent of an unpaid intern, but it's not office work. So, and it's a little bit more like that. Like usually you'll have company housing, but part of your paycheck is pulling out for that company housing, right? Or there's like a company store, and it's like the only store around, kind of similar to like Gold Rush in California way back when miners got stuck in miner towns. That's kind of the flavor we're going with there. Now, let's talk about that military structure, all right? In terms of readiness, the Theocracy is probably the most ready military out of anyone. They are mostly made up of volunteers right now. They have not conscripted a whole bunch of people like the Middle Kingdom and Dinter Lords have. Instead, they just rely on their people to be willing to serve. And they also run a reservist corps. So they've got reservist units in case the homeland ever comes under attack. Now, mech piloting within this military, super big deal. If you get into being a mech pilot, you are praised, right? You are rated higher, your rank is higher, your pay is better than the standard average Joe foot soldier, right? And that is because of two things. One, you are piloting a mech, which is a very expensive piece of machinery, thanks to those cores that we talked about last time. And in addition to that, you also have to pass a certain fitness level, and you have to pass a certain training regimen, which takes a while to train, and they only train pilots in one spot. And that spot is not at the capital. There's actually this little chain of islands where they train pilots on. And that is done to help keep it secretive, secure, and to get the best cream of the crop out of the pilot groups. Usually if you fail pilot school, you just become like an enlisted officer within the normal military, but you don't get the, right, like that's not the same as being a pilot. So many people aspire to be a pilot, both Forgeborn and human. Now, most Forgeborn, since we're on the subject of that, they end up becoming engineers, both civil engineers and military engineers, right? On like working on whatever. And I'm keeping terms very broad, just so that I don't get too much in the weeds with y'all. But there will, of course, be supplements that come out later that talk more about specific things, right? Like when you go read books that I write, there will be more about little nitty-gritty details in all of those so that you can explore them as much as your heart desires. And that, the reason why the Forgeborn mostly go to the engineers is because of their thought patterns, right? Like they're very creative in their thinking. They're very much like that line folding it down right across the table and going out from the idea instead of going from idea to idea. And this ends up being very this ends up being very good because they've got longer lives than humans, right? And they can take longer to perfect their projects and get them done within their lifetime. Now, humans might not appreciate that as much because their lives are a little bit shorter, but there's no shortage of humans, so no one's that concerned at the end of the day. Now, both humans and Forgeborn still serve in the infantry, still can serve as pilots, right? We talked a little bit about that last time. And then also the Navy. So yes, we've got a steampunk Navy going on, and that Navy does include an Air Force that is still referred to as a Navy and not quite an Air Force. So it's still attached to something, but there are like airships, right? So Zeppelins, they've got some of those. They've got a special branch of troops that deploy from those, and we'll talk about those in a minute. Now, in terms of standard infantry squad, right? Since the Theocracy is a little bit more structured than everyone else, this is going to be a bit more structured than when we talked about the Middle Kingdom. There is, of course, a squad leader, and they are just called a squad leader. And usually a squad consists of about 7 infantry units. When one of those 7 being that squad leader, the other 6 are just referred to as riflemen. There might be an assistant squad leader, depending on if that is a command squad or not. From that, they go into a standard company and regiment size. You can feel free to correct me in the comments if I have that wrong and you know for sure. But they follow kind of that standard thing from us where they've got different sizes for companies, regiments, battalions. And that differs, of course, a little bit from the mechs. Mechs more so work in either groups or alone, especially if they are those artillery mechs. Those are usually just in groups of 1 to 2. The scout mechs kind of work in packs, and usually referred to as packs, numbering anywhere from 3 to 6 individual mechs there. And then that more heavy-hitting mech v mech, for lack of a more unique term, they are going to be kind of either 1v1ing a mech, or they might work in lines next to infantry. But they usually don't work in a squad format. They're usually by themselves and given orders that way. Now, for the pilots, They do have a pistol for self-defense, just, since their mechs could possibly get destroyed, and they can survive without that. But then again, they do take longer to train, so usually a number of squads may sacrifice themselves to extract a pilot if the pilot is alive, and of course the battery inside that mech. Now, I said I'd talk a little bit more about that specialized group of infantry. They aren't quite pilots, but they're not quite standard infantry, so sometimes when you flunk out of the pilot program, you might get sorted into these, and that is going to be the Theocracy Stormtroopers. All right, they deploy from airships, and they are normally more so of urban combat / urban defense units, and they deploy into those small areas. Very good at city fighting in this case, unlike World War II. Stormtroopers in Germany, which were good at fighting over trenches, and that was their main goal, was claiming enemy trenches. That was World War I and a little bit of World War II. But again, if there's anything I say that you're just like, I just really need to correct you, make sure it's structured. But I'm totally okay with constructive criticism in the comments. I feel like that's good, right? Like that fact checks me, and if there's something where I changed that, then I can always let you guys know. Now, moving on from that, and then again, if you guys need something covered in depth more, feel free to let me know somehow. Like I said, we now have the Patreon dropping, and if I'm going to go into something a little bit more depth than like a comment on one of these things, I'll probably just drop it as a free post on Patreon, since I'm going to use that as sort of a blog going forward to keep you all updated. Then, yeah, hopefully that's good. If anyone has other ideas, or is I don't really feel like continuously going to Patreon, then let me know. If there's a big enough group, we might spice it up and get something else going on. But right now it is mostly just me running the show and my editor doing editing when he can. And so until this gets bigger, that's pretty much where we're at, right? Because time, funds, other resources constrain us to only be able to do certain things. But done with that spiel, we're going to now jump into a day in the life of a Theocracy citizen. Now, Theocracy citizens have equal opportunity to make it anywhere, right? Ideally, anyone should be able to get where Lord Saunter is, that guy in charge of the whole Theocracy, or be able to get to some position within the 100 Elders group that we talked about as well last week. That kind of depends on their ambition and their competitiveness, and could be factored into a little bit of where they start in life, right? Because that's just normal things, right? Like if you start a race and you're way behind somebody else, you've got to put in a lot more effort to get to where they are, versus if they start way in front of you. So it is that idea. It's not a perfect system, but it's been working for the past while, right? And so everyone keeps it around. And what's also cool is, unlike a lot of places that are kind of hesitant about welcoming in new members, the main idea for the Theocracy is, if you support the idea of the Theocracy existing, right? If you denounce your old ways, your old place, and dive into the Theocracy, then you can. And they accept you as a citizen. There are a few requirements that go into it. Depending on how it all goes, you may or may not get stuck. It does cost a bit of money, so you can incur some debt on the way in, which could also get you stuck a little bit lower to start out with. But ideally, you should be able to get yourself out of that, and your kids won't inherit that debt like they do in the Middle Kingdom or in the Dinterland Lords. Now, they've got lots of food. Compared to everyone else, the Theocracy has the most food, the most industrialization, right? So the only way you can go hungry is really if you're not working. If you're working, you're eating, is the idea within the Theocracy. And that is, of course, not done through any state distributed food plans. That is just because there are vendors out there that are vending food or raw materials like flour, vegetables, fruits to make food. And you can go out, buy those, make your own food, or go buy already made food from a street vendor. Which, for those people out there, and for anyone that I talked to about this last week, I had just to fill you all in. This is a random tangent, but bear with me. I had one of the best apple fritters I've ever had last week. So I made the executive decision, of course, to include apple fritters with inside Tales of Agmar. There's a street vendor in the capital city that vends apple fritters, or vendors apple fritters. If someone could tell me what that is somehow, like the correct word I should use for that, definitely feel free to. But anyways, there are still, of course, taxes that happen. It's mostly just sales tax on services and goods. There's no income tax. There is no, remaining property tax. It's actually pretty solid. The government has their own sponsored things that make them money, right? Like their own little corporations that make them money. Or like they buy and sell goods just like a corporation would inside their government. And so instead of them like trying to control everything, they're more seen as like an assistant within the commerce. I'll go more into that later. I'm also not like an econ expert, so if anyone is, definitely feel free to like dive into if I did explain some very specific economy. I would like to know. Now, we've covered taxes, we've covered food, right? Job security is pretty good. Unless you suck at your job, then you might be out of a job and you have to go find a new one. But like I said, there's tons of different jobs to choose from. Schooling does exist, but it's more so in the form of apprenticeships and scholars/educators for like higher level things, right? So you might pull in, and there could be like public educators that educate in like one place and will do like a school, so to be, right? But it's a private school that you got to pay to get into. It's not state sponsored. So that is another thing that can either bite you in the butt or can help you out depending on where you're at and how things are going. Now, the average person, unlike everywhere else where everyone's like waking up at the crack of dawn and everything, you actually get to sleep in when you're in the Theocracy. So not only do you have indoor plumbing, but you have the ability to sleep in, right? So it's pretty good here. It's not bad at all. It's quite excellent. And they work a contracted job for X amount of hours usually, or X amount of resources, depending on what kind of what their contract entails, right? And then they're paid for it. Not always paid like the day of, right? But it can be the day of, or it can be like a every other week sort of pay thing, similar to us. Now, lots of people live in the capital. That's usually where most people live. And then there are extraction centers that people go out to on like trains in the morning or at night, right? Depending if you're working a night shift, because night shift is an option if you're a night person. But everything revolves around the capital, which is called New Canta. And right here, I talked a little bit about how there's like the multi-level underneath that not a lot of the citizens know about. But the capital itself has like two layers that everyone knows. There's like a surface layer, and then there's kind of a lower layer, which the lower layer is mostly going to be military stuff now. It used to be a lot of like cheaper residential, but they actually moved that up in favor of putting the military closer to that. And the big reason is because, right, you want to protect the cores from everyone else finding out about them. Now, Freedom Street is a specific street inside of New Canta, which is entertainment focused. And it's an area that's got like moving pictures, so movie theater, right? It's got different exhibits of things around the world, right? The Theocracy has taken this idea of, hey, we're everywhere, we should bring everywhere to us. And they've done that with museums. And Aurelians have started making an appearance here. So the Theocracy has two main species, but they've also got a third species, kind of making a bigger relevance there. And then you will occasionally find Teravan, which is the four-armed people in various places. They might work, they might be a bartender, like my boy Steve. I don't know if I've mentioned him, but Steve is the four-armed bartender that basically started the Teravan race within my creative process. That is not the lore of Steve, but that is how that works with Steve. Anyways, and these Aurelian people, they've come, they've worked, sometimes they buy their way in with lots of ambrosia, and it'll be like chunks of tribes at one time that come in, and some of them find work as, or quite a few of them find their work on Freedom Street to begin with as entertainers or as extraction workers. Those are kind of the like grunt level jobs that people can get very easily, and that's usually what you get when you first come in. Now the working conditions are better than other places, but can still suck, right? Like a mine can collapse whenever, and it's really bad. It's not good at all. It's not good for anybody, but it is usually safer. Now, just to get the general idea of citizens' thoughts inside the Theocracy to close this up, they're disgusted by the idea of kings, queens, even noble lords, right? They don't want any one person to claim that they have ownership over another person. They don't want someone to claim that, they are basically destined to rule, right? Even the Saunter family, which has been ruling the Theocracy for a while, doesn't outright say this. Now, no one knows how they keep getting elected, but they do, and no one's really complaining because life's still good. And that sums up the Theocracy. So thanks for coming. This was a little bit faster. This is about how I normally talk to people anyways. Let me know if this was too fast. If it's too fast, totally fine. I'll slow it back down. If you thought this was exciting, let me know too. I really want to make this in a way that you guys, one, can get used to my voice because I will be here for a while, and two, it conveys enough information that gets you guys excited but doesn't do too much to where you guys are like, oh my goodness, that was a whole lot and my brain's exploding, or I missed like everything. Definitely just let me know. We will be dropping the next episode after this one, of course, next Friday at 7 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time. Again, we've got that Patreon out. Please feel free to check it out if you're really enjoying what you've heard so far about Tales of Agmar. I promise you it's just going to keep getting better and better. I'm constantly improving my workflow and my writing and speaking, entertaining skills, right? I don't know what to exactly call them. But nonetheless, it's improving, and you're going to love it no matter when you step into the universe. You're going to love everything about it. And if there's something that you think might not be in the universe, it probably is somehow, because there's a lot of things in here. Now, with that said, I hope you all have a good week, and I will see you next time.